up, guys? This is Larry. Welcome to Military Stories. In this video I'm going to be talking about weapons caches. I'm going to talk about one of the largest weapons caches we found while deployed. I'm going to talk about a couple other significant caches we found, and also on one of our caches we found, we were setting up security for the blast to happen, and during that time an insurgent, bad dude, came up behind one of our trucks and threw a grenade in the turret, and the grenade exploded and a couple guys were wounded and received Purple Hearts from that attack. So I'm going to be talking about that. If you're new here, every week I tell a story about my military experiences, whether deployed overseas or in training, after military life, training up for a private security contracting job. Once a week I release stories about my experiences, and then also I usually take that long video, 10 to 30 minutes, and I break it up into a couple shorts each week. So that's what we're doing here. If that sounds like something you'd be interested in, subscribe. Every week there'll be a new video. This last week we had a bunch of new subscribers. I really appreciate it. I appreciate the new following. I appreciate you guys wanting to hear my stories, wanting to hear what I'm trying to do. You know, I like to talk about the stories. I'm passionate about the military and our country, and I feel like these stories need to be told. Like, I try to do research on some of these stories, and there's nothing out there on the internet. And if nobody's gonna be telling these stories, I'll do my best to tell them the best I remember from my perspective, and I hope you guys enjoy hearing these stories. And I know we have some military veterans following along. I know we have some people that didn't serve and maybe their family served. They like hearing the stories, or maybe you don't have any affiliation with the military at all and you just like to hear about what we did over there and what the military is like. You know, this channel's for you. I appreciate the support, the comments. I like hearing your guys' stories, your input. I appreciate all of it. And if you haven't already, last week I talked about an EFP attack where my good friend was killed and a company commander was killed. So if you haven't already, check out last week's video. Alright, getting into the story. So I talked about before our patrol schedules. We would do day patrols, night patrols, perimeter security, raids while deployed in Iraq. And I was there in 2006 for this story, and when we would go out on patrol, we would talk to people in the villages. We would look for bad guys. You know, we would get engagements if people made contact, or sometimes we would just go look for weapons caches. And the insurgents, the bad dudes, they would take all their weapons, rockets, mortars, munitions that they would attack us with, and they would hide them like out in the farmlands, in the berms that surrounded the farmlands. They would bury them in the ground. And so some days we would go out there and we would search for weapons caches. If we had nothing else going on, we would try and find where they were hiding their weapons, and then we would call up EOD, Explosive Ordnance Detachment, or Explosive Ordnance Division, and they would come out and they would blow it all up in place so that it would give the enemy less supplies to attack us with. So the largest one we ever found, we were out one day. I had a metal detector. So one guy would have the metal detector, usually me. I don't know why. I got assigned to it at first, and I was pretty good at it. I was pretty good at locating where stuff would be. I don't know. I had an eye for it. And then a guy next to me would be walking, usually with like a squad automatic weapon, a M249 machine gun. So he would be following me because my weapon would be slung on my back, and I'd have this metal detector with a little box, and it was, you know, it was an army issued metal detector. It was long, green, had a ring on the bottom. I had a little box here for noise and for sensitivity, and so I'd kind of mess with that as I was walking. And I would have a guy walking with me that was pulling security. He would have a machine gun and he'd follow me around. So if I started looking for something and started digging, then this guy would be pulling security up on the berm or something, while the rest of the platoon was pulling a wider security. We'd have trucks set up a really wide perimeter while I was searching for weapons caches. And we had found a lot. I mean, in our year there, we probably found 200 separate weapons caches, probably more, but at the minimum 200 times we would find something buried, dig it up, lay it out, call up EOD, blow it up, and resume on our day. So it was very common that we found their caches. And you know, I think 90% of it was the enemy, wherever they got their stuff from, but some of it I think also was from the Iran-Iraq war, like what was left over. And I think they either buried it from that, or I also think some of it was when the initial invasion happened, the Iraqi army hid a lot of their stuff in the farmlands thinking it would never be found, you know, stuff they shouldn't have. And I will talk about that in a little bit. Some of the bigger caches we found that quite didn't make sense for a lower level insurgency. So on this particular day, I'm walking, and we're like kind of near this river, marsh, and open farmland, and I'm walking, and I got the metal detector out, and as I'm walking, I hit something. You know, there's no metal out there. They don't have sodas like we do as often. I mean, I guess in the city they had some sodas, and so you just find aluminum cans, but metal was very rare to find out in the farmlands. They didn't have plumbing like we do, so there was no pipes running under the ground. There was no wire running under the ground, so finding metal was very unique. It was usually probably something. So I hit metal, and I'm scanning over, and I hit it. I'm like, all right, cool, found a spot right here. So then I want to see how long it is, right? So I'm scanning how long it is. I'm scanning, and I'm walking like 5 feet, and it's still scanning that long. I'm like, well, that's weird. Usually it's like a circle, and it'd be buried right there. But this was scanning far, 10 feet. I mean, I think it was actually like 15, 20 feet total long, all the way that long. I'm like, man, this is very unusual. I started to think it can't be a weapons cache. It's got to be an old pipe or something, even though, like I said, they don't have pipes out there. So anyway, so I kind of figured out where it would be. We kind of outlined, and then we start digging. We got a couple guys with shovels, and I start digging down to it. And I mean, I probably dug this far down before I hit anything. So I'm digging, and finally I hit something, and it's hard. And so I'm like, all right, I hit something, and so I'm digging further, and I each time I hit it, like a little bit of dust would come off, and it was like, found out it was fiberglass. It was a shell of a fiberglass something. So we keep digging, and I get to that part, and I dig over the top of it, and it's rounded. So to me, it still is kind of like a pipe, a large pipe. So I dig all that out, and then I had another guy digging farther down, the same thing. We didn't undig all of this because this is a lot of stinking work, but we were just trying to figure out what it was. So eventually we had the top of it undug, and we couldn't like even get all the way around it at first. It was so wide, so big, that, you know, we couldn't even figure out like the full side of it. I mean, so like literally like an hour of digging, we finally we still don't know what this is, but it's like a rounded that goes far, and we dug all the way around it and underneath it, and on one spot here, and then one spot way over there. And then we backed up 2 Humvees, and we had wire or cable to like I forget what the name of it, but it's to like pull or tow someone. There was like a winch cable, probably what it's called. But so we dug around each side, 2 Humvees backed up, and we took this wire and put it under the fiberglass tube, and the 2 trucks at the same time, the wire was around the tube, cinched on itself, 2 trucks, and then these guys drove, and like they were driving like, you know, trying to get this pipe to come out or whatever it was. And finally we eventually got it out. They pulled, and this thing kind of rolled out, and they got it out. And so now this thing is fully out. And what it was is it was a large fiberglass open tube type thing, and inside of it was stuffed with rockets, mortars, boxes of ammunition, RPG rounds, stuffed inside this tube. I mean, this tube was probably, like I said, like 10, 15, 20 feet long, and you know, as wide as, I would say, you know, 4 feet. And so now we got to start figuring out what this stuff is. What is all in here? So I'm one of the smaller guys, so I take off my vest, take off my helmet, and to be able to fit inside this tube. So I crawl inside this tube and I start handing out rockets, mortars, and some of the stuff is rusted, old, and like literally if I bump it wrong, I could have exploded. I'm trying to handle this stuff with caution. Rockets, mortars, you know, boxes of ammunition. So eventually we get it all out. We get all the stuff laid out. We laid it out and spread it all out. And I have a picture I'll post right now of the final discovery laid out. Me and my buddies were just standing there in awe of like, wow, this is a lot of stuff. So we laid it all out. I mean, I would say roughly probably, you know, like 70 mortars, probably like 20 to 30 rockets, probably 40 boxes of ammunition, mostly 7.62 round, because that's what they used in their AK-47 was 7.62. I mean, they had like flares, like small mini rockets, RPG rounds, larger rockets, 122 millimeter mortar rounds that they used for IEDs. I mean, this cache was filled. I mean, this was like significant attacks worth of stuff. So then we had to call EOD. You know, they come from one of the larger bases, and so they eventually get out there and they pile all the stuff up. They put charges on it, like C4 charges, and then they detonate in place. So in that procedure, they have us back up like 300 meters away from the explosion in a circle perimeter, and then they would count out on the radio. They would say, all right, controlled detonation happened in 5 minutes. Close your hatches, hide down in your truck for the detonation so that when it explodes, there's no shrapnel and stuff that would injure anybody. So we're sitting inside our trucks, we're waiting, and they say, all right, 5 minutes, and then they call up again, all right, 60 seconds, call up again, 30 seconds, 10 seconds, and then all of a sudden, you know, 5, 4, 3, and then there's a massive explosion. When they do these controlled detonations of caches, the explosion is so big. I remember sitting in my truck, and some of the explosions would cover my entire peripheral vision. Like the fireball so big, I would almost close my eyes thinking like we're gonna die. Like, is this gonna blow us up too? That's how wide and big the explosion was. Just massive. One time we did a controlled det, and we just wanted to feel like what it was like to be closer and outside. So there was a building nearby, and we stood by the building, and when the explosion happened, you could like feel the concussion in your chest. The glass shattered in the house. You know, there was women and children there. They started screaming. We're like, it's okay, it was us. But it, you know, when these explosions happen, it's stinking massive. So then another cache we found that was pretty significant is one time we were out in the middle of this field, and out in the middle of the field, when typically they hide stuff on the perimeter in the berms, and in this field we were going over it, and it was like a perfect square and metal was hitting. We're like, that's odd. You know, usually it's like a circle, it's like a long tube like I discussed before, but this was a perfect square. So we start digging down, and when we finally get to something, we see rockets that are in a triangle shape, and it's got like wrap around it, like plastic wrap. I mean, almost like saran wrap, but much thicker. And it was like the start of a massive pile that was wrapped. So it was so big, and we found a second one, a second square, same thing. So big that we had to call up engineers to come out to our location to help us dig this out. We weren't going to be able to do it with shovels and with our hands. So an hour later, these guys get out there. They got their trucks. I mean, they got bulldozers, they got excavators, and it started to become nighttime. We found this cache probably mid-afternoon, and these guys were digging, and it got nighttime. So we had to get our trucks set up, like shining lights on it so that they could see what they were doing. Finally, hours later, probably like 1 o'clock in the morning, they had to like hoist it out. They finally get it out, and what it was is it was two separate, and they were like pallets of munitions, rockets, all perfectly stacked with wrap around it, buried 10 feet underground. And So that was very strange. I don't think some random insurgents, you know, Al-Qaeda or whatever, would bury pallets of saran wrap rockets. So that seemed kind of odd to me. That kind of seemed like the Iraqi government was hiding that, or it could have been way back from the Iraq-Iran war, but it didn't seem like that old of munitions. So that one was kind of strange. Another time, I wasn't there that day, but my guys they dug down and found multiple 500-pound bombs buried, and massive bombs that could take out a whole village buried in the ground. And you know, they always talk about WMDs and, you know, what we found, and yeah, we didn't find any weapons of mass destruction, but we sure found chemical bombs. We found 500-pound bombs. We found pallets buried full of munitions. I mean, they were hiding a lot of stuff that we found. I mean, who knows what we didn't find. We were finding pallets buried 10 feet under the ground, perfectly wrapped, that we needed, you know, huge equipment to get out. You know, just our platoon found that. You know, imagine throughout the country what everybody else was finding. So I'm going to tell one more story, and that is, we found a weapons cache one time, and we were setting up security, and we had all our guys in a perimeter, right? Like I told you, we would wait for the countdown. So we closed the hatch, and we're waiting for the countdown, 10 minutes or whatever. So that means the gunner normally sits up above the truck. You know, he's got his turret up there, he's pulling security, and so when the explosion happens, we don't want that guy's head and his body to be exposed. So he closes the hatch, and he comes down. So when you come down, you got a hatch that closes like this, and then there's like a secondary flap that closes like this. So there's like the first flap, and then the whole thing opens. And so we closed it, and this part was open like this. The hatch was closed, but there was a little slit, that last little part still open. And that was probably like to let air in the truck. It was so hot. We had our windows up. It was hot. And they were backed up against like a small river creek and like some trees. So, and they're facing inwards. They shouldn't have been, but their trucks and everybody was facing inwards to like look at the blast. We've done this 100 times before, and occasionally the enemy would like launch mortars at us while we were sitting on a cache site to get us to leave, but you know, that was about it. Mortars while we were sitting on a cache site. But on this particular day, while we were sitting there, an enemy insurgent had come up to the truck and threw a grenade into the turret. And if that hatch was open, it would have went into the truck and killed everybody inside. So it lands on top of the truck, detonates, and like I said, that one little part was open, so all the shrapnel went into the vehicle. And one of my good friends, he lives in Texas, and we still talk to this day, he was hit with shrapnel on his shoulder, on his face, and his eye. He still has shrapnel in his eye to this day. They don't want to mess with it because it can mess up his vision. He said his vision is kind of blurred, but you know, there's still a piece in there they couldn't get out. And then there was another guy sitting next to him, and he had shrapnel all in his arm. And so both those guys ended up getting Purple Hearts for that incident. But so we were sitting on a cache, guys exploded a grenade, and a couple of guys got injured. So then we had to kind of change our tactics. All right, we definitely need to be facing out from now on and be a little bit more cautious of people coming up on us while we're sitting there. You know, we were kind of complacent at that time when we were waiting for a detonation, and we've done this 100 times before. We thought it was nothing of it. So that's my story about weapons caches. We found a lot more than that. You know, like I said, hundreds of weapons caches, sometimes in rice bags buried in a berm, sometimes on a pallet, sometimes in a tube, sometimes in a couch in a house, sometimes in between blankets. I found like sniper rifle and AK-47 and stuff in between blankets before, and you know, we found in multiple different locations, and I just wanted to share some of the stuff we found. And so next week I'm probably going to be talking either about a ranger school story or the raids we went on. So one of those two, I'll probably take a vote, see what you guys want, either about raids, a couple significant raids, or a story from ranger school. You know, either like following a tree, which I thought was a person, or getting attacked by bees or something like that. Thank you guys for following along. I appreciate the support. If you haven't already, subscribe so you can hear more stories like this. I appreciate the support. Take care. God bless.